Good afternoon. This is the third episode of the podcast. Today I'm here with a guest. I've got Russell Jowell. Hi, Russell. How are you?
Hi, good. Glad to be here.
Good. So do you want to start by telling everyone a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So basically, I am really just a freelance, independent app developer. I kind of dabble in kind of all kind of areas. Kind of started my career doing like civic and political engagement apps a few years back. But more recently, kind of what has brought me here is I've discovered Unity gaming and have been working on building some mobile games in recent months.
That's pretty cool. So the whole point of this podcast is talk a little bit about Unity.
Mm-hmm.
Now, being a software developer myself and being quite familiar with C#, you think I would have played with Unity at some point in time. The answer is no, not really.
Yeah.
And the reason is very simple. I don't know why it got stuck in my mind. It's actually quite a complex framework to learn and play with. So here's a first question. Do you need exceptional math skills to be able to program using Unity?
So that's a good first question, and I guess I'll answer that by with a couple things. Well, first I'll say I think before you decide to get into Unity, like you mentioned, I think you do need to have solid programming skills down. You need to be able to write basic programs in an object-oriented language, preferably C#, because that is the language of Unity. But honestly, as far as like math and like physics skills go, if you're looking to do just kind of simple games like 2D games, you actually don't need the really complex math that some of the other games might require. Now, again, obviously, if you're working at like Blizzard or Bethesda or some of the other big companies, you're working on a very complex game. They have staff whose only job is to translate physics laws into code. But actually, yeah, you don't need a whole lot of advanced math. But again, I think you do need to be pretty solid in your kind of coding fundamentals before you dive into Unity.
Mm. Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And also it depends what you build with it. So you touched on the
Absolutely.
2D games. Once you move to 3D games and you talk about collisions and moving in a 3D space and all that kind of stuff, I guess that's probably where you need a bit more knowledge, I would think, right?
Yeah, exactly. And especially if you're modeling any kind of physics, and it's interesting. The other kind of area that I think a lot of people might not realize is fluid dynamics, actually, because how do you, if you're modeling water of some kind or liquid, you've got to translate those principles into code. And I remember when I was first learning to code, one of the things that one of my teachers taught me was when you were developing any program, but especially games, is that you are really God when you're designing a game. And what that means is if you don't code it, it does not happen. So if you don't explicitly tell your water to splash when a rock hits it, it will not splash.
I see.
Or if you don't tell your character to fall when it goes off a cliff, it will not fall. Now the other side of that is, as a game programmer, you don't necessarily have to be bound by the physics laws of planet Earth. If you want your character to be able to fly, you can do that. If you want your character to be able to walk on water, you can do that as well. But yeah, again, you as a programmer, have to physically somehow provide the logic for that, or it won't happen.
That's actually quite interesting. So is there something like I don't know how to describe this. Like normal behavior, like for example, imagine you sit on the side of a lake and you see the water moving a little bit. Is there something like that randomly that you can just say, just do that, and do these things whenever you want, basically?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I guess one, one kind of, I don't know, maybe it's a misconception or not, but just so Unity itself, I mean, it's a wonderful program, but Unity actually doesn't do a lot of the modeling. Like, you can do kind of basic primitive shapes in it, but if you want to model like any kind of characters or whatever, you have to do that in kind of an external program, like, I don't know, Blender, Maya, what have you. And then, as you mentioned, to kind of create, like, let's say just a flowing lake or something like that. And those who are kind of familiar with, or if you've ever heard of like animation states. So like you could build your lake and say this lake is flowing, and then you build your animation so that waves flow, or say this lake is this wave is moving, and you do your wave moving over the shore or what have you. Unity actually has, and one of the things I will say, because I've used a number of kind of cross-platform frameworks and other kind of areas of mobile development, and I will say Unity is actually very, very intuitive in a lot of ways. They actually do have a very powerful kind of animator tool to handle that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's essentially how it works. Is you build, they call them game objects. You put your models in, whether it's a person, a character, sprite, whatever. And where C# comes in is you really use kind of C# to define what the behavior of those objects is.
Okay, so is it more like a scripting kind of thing? Like, for example, you place a Unity, you place a unit on your screen somewhere, an asset of some kind, like a person, let's say, and then you would attach some behavior to it, or do you have like a main game loop where you have to control like everything, and the code could get
yeah. So that's essentially how it works. Is you can attach a C# script to really anything in your universe, and how it works is that each Unity object, and I think this is actually a greater C# class. Each Unity script is a subclass of the mono behavior. I don't know if you're familiar with that. And that's kind of the object. And every script includes, you can put whatever function you want, but every script includes two functions: a start function and an update function. And the start function is called on each object as soon as the game starts. So you set up everything, and then the update is called on each frame refresh. So, and like I said, you can add whatever else you want, but those are kind of the two
the main things. Yeah,
exactly.
That's pretty cool. So in terms of now, I haven't used it much, like I said before, but I did watch quite a few videos of people showing you how to do this kind of stuff, and you could argue that it's quite interesting to watch someone write code and do this kind of stuff. But I actually find that learning about it in this kind of manner, even without looking at an IDE and at some code, it's actually very useful, because you get an idea of what you can do, not necessarily how you would do it, but it's there, so you can always the documentation must be extensive by now, I suppose.
Yes.
Yeah, it's been around for God knows how many years now, right? I'm just wondering now, a random question I'm just popping to my mind.
Yeah, sure.
Do you know any kind of mainstream games, like not necessarily mobile, but more like desktop, that have been built with Unreal with Unity?
Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, Unity, I mean, in my view anyway, from what I've observed, is probably the number one game engine in the world right now. And I don't know anything off the top of my head. But I know probably most of probably I don't know, 80 or 90% of any game you've ever played has probably used
Oh,
Unity
really?
somewhere. Yeah, I know for a fact that Blizzard uses Unity. I I mean, I would imagine, like a company like Bethesda would as well. Yeah, no, it is absolutely, I think the kind of the standard
Wow.
right now. Now the other one out there is, I don't know if you've ever heard of the Unreal
Of
Engine.
course, Unreal.
Yeah,
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 it's on version 5 now, isn't it?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that they're probably a number two. I don't think I have nearly the market share as Unity does, but yeah, those are kind of the two bigger ones.
It's quite interesting, actually, because when you think Unity and C Sharp, I had this idea in my head that most games have been written in the past in something like C++
Mhm.
for a number of reasons, like memory management and everything else. Is that still the case, or do you find that actually things have shifted more towards using a language like C Sharp and Unity?
Well, that's kind of the nice thing about gaming is, I mean, you can write it in anything. Like I don't know if this, but I also teach classes, and actually Python has a reasonably capable game engine. It's nowhere near what like a Unity can do. But I mean, yeah, you can do games and anything. I think C++ is still very much a standard. Simply because performance is very very crucial. You need your code to be pretty efficient
Yeah.
to be able to draw those 30 or 50 frames a second. And I think that's why, I don't know why, they have gone with C Sharp on Unity. Again, I think it's a great language. I don't have any problem with it, but if I don't know what their reasoning was for that, but yeah, I think any language you do use has got to be relatively fast and relatively powerful to kind of do the kind of calculations that are needed.
Yeah, that's a great thing, actually. Now, C Sharp has become probably, I could say, more and more mainstream every year, really, with all the updates moving to .NET Core. And I've personally had amazing experience coding, not just on Windows but on Linux as well, using .NET Core. So I can see why it would basically open up the door to a number of people who otherwise would not develop games. Right, because C++ is a very difficult thing to master, I would think.
Yeah. Yeah, and from my experience, as far as the C languages go, I guess C itself, C++, and C Sharp. I think C Sharp is definitely probably the most accessible, if you will. It's actually not and it's actually not too dissimilar from Java.
Yeah, you could
and
say that.
Yeah, and actually, in the classes that I teach, we often teach them in tandem. But no, I think you're right. C Sharp is probably definitely one of the more accessible of that family.
Okay, should we insert some jokes about Java at this point, or maybe not?
Oh boy!
Like, for example, did you know that Java runs on 3 billion devices?
Uh-oh.
And it's been running on that for the past 15 years, because every time I run an install, it says the same thing. Java runs on 3 billion devices since like 1990 something.
Oh boy!
There you go. An example of a terrible joke.
I have to remember that. Yeah.
So tell me a bit more. You said you teach classes. What kind of classes are we talking about here?
Yeah, so I teach coding classes for K through 12 elementary, middle school students. Primarily introductory and intermediate Python, but also web development, mobile development, and the occasional Unity course as well.
That's pretty cool. So high school. So does that mean that do you find that? So what kind of ages are we talking about, first of all?
Yeah, so for me, well, first of all, the company I teach for, they teach starting from like kindergarten and all the way through high school. But me personally, I usually about like probably like fourth through like 11th grade, late elementary through high school. And I find that's probably the age range that is really most receptive to learning, type
So
type
elementary
code.
to high school. I'm trying to translate that because you're in US, I'm in UK. What does that mean? We're talking 8 to maybe 14, 15 years old, something like that?
Yeah.
Interesting. Now, okay, here's a very politically correct question.
Oh, boy.
Do you get girls that are actually interested in this as well? I'm really curious here.
Uh-huh. Say one more time.
Do you get girls who are also interested in this
Oh,
kind of courses?
no, that's a fair question. And yes, I do. Excuse me. Yeah, I get a number of girls that seem very receptive to it. Yeah, go ahead.
Interesting, because the reason I ask is because I've got two of my own, and I'm trying to get them into this, but I'm not very successful at this point in time. That's the only reason I'm asking.
Yeah. Well, and something I found is, first of all, I believe that really anybody can, learn to code. I don't think you have to be, a special disposition or anything. But that said, I will say that, I find you definitely have to, have an interest in it and kind of a desire to learn. And and I have had a bunch of students whose parents just kind of signed them up for and I think if you're not into it, if it's not interesting material for you, because at the end of the day, it is, it's fun, but you're not, it's not like playing a sport or anything. You're not up and about, you're on a computer, you're typing, and if that's something you can handle, great. But if it's not, then maybe it's just not for you.
That's a great point, actually. And it might be what the world has become, because obviously, you see, I'm going to sound really old now, but I don't want to say back when I was young in my time,
back in my day.
I'm probably going to say that. But back then, we used to go out all the time and meet our friends and play and do that kind of stuff. And nobody was interested in spending time inside their house, until 9-10 o'clock in the evening. But things have now changed, right? You had COVID, Absolutely. Where people were stuck in the house for years. And then there's also this culture where we spend too much time on devices rather than meeting people face to face. And probably that's what maybe encourages a lot of people to actually pick up coding. But even so, we still don't seem to have enough people, because there's always this complaint: we don't have enough. Okay, maybe other reasons, and this is probably not the right time for that. It's like a whole different podcast.
That's a whole other question. Yeah,
a whole other thing. Yeah, I just find it interesting, because now this will actually lead us into the next area. For example, for you, how did you start as a developer, and when did you realize that this is something you actually want to do?
Yeah. So I've been writing code in kind of various forms my entire life. As far back as high school, I was building simple websites. Like I took an HTML class in high school, and I remember. I don't know. Do you remember GeoCities? Does that name ring any bells?
Oh, Jesus! Of course. Wow, I'm feeling really old now.
I know. That's how old we are here. I had a GeoCities account, and a MySpace page, actually. I know. Yeah, that's old fogies here. But and it's kind of what's made me kind of dive into it kind of full time is I was kind of looking for a career transition. My previous background was in like nonprofit communications, and actually the organization I worked for, they like monitored labor rights in garment factories around the world, to make sure there was no forced labor, no child labor, that kind of thing. And I'm not sure, maybe you are where most of the world's clothes are made in Asia, China, Bangladesh, Vietnam, and consequently we had offices over there. So I'll never forget, I actually got to go to Bangladesh in I think it was 2013.
Oh, nice.
And it was an interesting experience. But one thing that stood out to me um, about the country, someone told me about Bangladesh. They said, this is a country where more people have mobile phones than have running water.
Wow.
And, I mean, it was true. Everyone I saw had a phone. Whether, regardless of kind of where they were in society, they all had phones. And I think that was kind of a seminal moment, and kind of why I have gravitated towards mobile development over anything is that we don't, I don't send this on only I'm going to say kids today, um, the term computer is meaningless. They don't think of computer. They just think of a device, of a screen. It's not a computer. It's just a screen of some size that you can do something on. Right. So that's kind of why I think I've gravitated towards the mobile side, because that includes, tablets, iPads as well.
That's an interesting point. So I was curious because now thinking about my own past and how I got into this, I remember, I think I was about 16 or 17 when I managed to buy my mother bought my first computer for me, not me, because they were expensive back then, like really expensive. And I remember, even now, I remember what I had. So I don't think I'm ever going to forget that. Imagine, I don't know if you remember these, but just try and picture it. 386 DX 40 megahertz processor. That's basically what I had, with 2 megabytes of RAM and 250 megabytes hard drive and a black and white screen. That was my first computer.
How much did that cost? How much did that?
It was, I don't remember the cost, but it was expensive.
It was ridiculous. Yeah,
it was expensive.
I know. 2 megs of memory. That was like, wow.
Yeah. Yes. And I always had this kind of crazy memory combinations because, I had a motherboards with 8 slots. So at some point my upgrade was like, I went from 2 to 5 and then from 5 to 8. That's like all kinds of crazy numbers. But the way, and what got me into programming was games. I was coding cheats for games to give me money. I was building text mode editors for games. Like I remember even now, like for UFO Unknown, which was a game where you had items, weapons, and bases. And I had a really nice editor to show you visually what you had. So that's pretty much how I got into coding. It wasn't as a career. I had no intention or desire to have a job through it, but that's how I got into it.
What you did,
so it's funny because we talk about game development and games. It seems like it's one way of getting into development without even realizing, because you have to. And back then, now we have a wealth of information, but back then you had to buy books. There was nothing. You would do a search.
You had to go buy yourself a book.
Exactly.
You couldn't get online. For sure.
There would be no search result when you search for something. Back then. Now you get anything 2 million results.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up because I know that's what I teach, and I know a lot of the other kind of organizations that are involved with teaching kids coding. That's what they do. They do it through games, like a Minecraft or I don't know what else, but they use it. Let's do our game. Because
Minecraft is an interesting one because obviously a lot of kids play that, and of course they have an actual interest into coding to make something fun in their worlds. So that's a great way of getting into it as well. That's brilliant, actually.
Absolutely, yeah.
Now, I had some misconceptions before coming into this call. I actually thought that Unreal Engine 5 was far more used than Unity. Because every time you look, and maybe that's a bit of an exaggeration, but when I look at a game, they make a point in telling you they use Unreal Engine 5, not 4, it's 5, and it's got extra things. So I don't know why that got me into thinking, okay, maybe everybody uses Unreal Engine then, not Unity. So that's hence my question on why and how many games do we think, or what kind of games do we think they're built with Unity. But I guess one of the things that probably puts me off game development is how much you need to know, because depending if it's a simple game, fine, but when you start talking graphics and movement and sounds and network play and all kinds of other things, it gets complicated very quickly.
It does. Again, that's kind of why I go back to I would not, if you don't know anything about coding, I would not start on Unity.
Yeah.
Because you're absolutely right, and and really that's really what it's all about, is really it's actually very tied to like object oriented programming. Because what you're doing is you're basically, someone told me it's kind of like building like a pinball machine, if you will. You're building like various objects that kind of have programmed behaviors and are waiting for things to happen to them. Like, if you're and it comes to mind, like if you're in Mario, like let's say you had like the code for the Goomba. The Goomba, it's programmed to just walk, side to side. And then if, Mario collides with it from the top, it will squash. So you definitely have to, be mindful of, what objects, interact with each other, what interactions should these objects expect. No, you're absolutely right. For sure.
It's funny because when you look at the game, each game has credits, and they look like movies these days. They're like a whole team of 50 to 100 people that worked on it, like artists and musicians and animation and 3D, whatever. In fact, I've seen that even you have it's just like a specialized role just to do, if you have a character, for example, just to make some specialized moves of some kind. That's an actual job.
They work.
It's interesting how much you need to know, and of course, nobody can know everything. You're not going to make a game by yourself.
Oh heavens, no!
This is quite interesting. So it actually makes me want to try and play a little bit with it and see what can be done, because there's a lot you can build, even if you don't put too much time into the graphics per se, because you've got assets that you can use, right? There must be some like a free pack of some kind.
So actually there is Unity has an asset store where various users can go to upload really anything. They've got 3D models. There's like particle generators, filters, really anything. And frankly, I think if you're looking for a basic object of some kind, if you need just like a tree or a plot of grass or an animal of some kind, you could do that yourself. But I mean, there is a wide community of people out there who do that, and I'd tell you that I'd probably use the asset store first before you invest the time into making something yourself.
Okay. All right, so this was very interesting. Now, before we wrap up, let's say, what kind of advice would you give to someone who, let's say, they have the coding skills are there, right? You've got a C# developer who's never done any game development, but what would you recommend they start with in this Unity world?
Sure. Well, I tell you to maybe go through some of the initial tutorials first, because they are very, very good. But the kind of initial game that I teach in my kids class is like basically a single ball billiard table, where you don't really need a lot of fancy graphics, right? You can use just the basic shape, but basically you build a plane with some walls on the side and put a ball kind of in the center that you can move around. I find that's usually a good.
So like a controlled environment, like a small room where you can try a few things and some effects, and
that way you can kind of get used to.
You
can get used to the physics and button responders and
that's a great point. Yeah, that's a great point, because it's a lot you can do. You've got your wall collisions. You might have some more objects, place them at some point in space. It's all, okay. Yeah, I can see that. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you very much, Russ. I really appreciate this. Thank you. And I hope whoever listens to this, they find this useful. Thank you.
Thank you, Andre, as well. Thank you.